I still remember the night that changed everything. It was a typical Tuesday evening in late August, and I had just stumbled upon an obscure forum thread on the dark web. The title read, "The Devourer," a legend born from shadow, a phrase that sent shivers down my spine. As a self-proclaimed urban explorer and true crime enthusiast, I had always been drawn to the darker corners of the internet. But this particular thread was different. It spoke of an ancient mythology that seemed to seep into the very fabric of reality itself. The story revolved around a cannibal from the American South, said to roam the woods under the cover of darkness, preying on the innocent and the unwary. They called him the Devourer, a figure shrouded in mystery and terrorized by the locals for generations. According to legend, the Devourer possessed an otherworldly ability, one that allowed him to manipulate reality itself. I scoffed at the notion, of course. I was a skeptic, always seeking the rational explanation behind every supernatural tale. But as I delved deeper into the thread, something felt off. A creeping sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach, refusing to be ignored. And then, there were the hushed conversations between strangers, sharing rumors and tales that chilled me to the bone. It was as if the Devourer was watching us, waiting for us to stumble into his world. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being pulled into a nightmare from which I might never awaken. And so, with a mix of morbid curiosity and trepidation, I decided to embark on a journey to uncover the truth behind the Devourer's legend. Little did I know that this decision would change my life forever. I spent the next few weeks poring over every thread, every post, and every conversation related to the Devourer. It was as if I had stumbled upon a hidden world, one that existed in the shadows of the dark web. The stories were always the same whispers of a cannibal who roamed the woods under the cover of darkness, feasting on the flesh of the living. Some said he was a creature from ancient mythology, born from the very depths of hell itself. Others claimed he was a human, driven mad by some unspeakable tragedy. But one thing remained constant: the Devourer's ability to manipulate reality. According to legend, if you were unlucky enough to cross his path, your deepest fears would become manifest before your very eyes. I tried to brush it off as mere folklore, but the more I read, the more I felt a chill run down my spine. It was as if the Devourer's presence was already seeping into my dreams, haunting me with images of darkness and despair. And then there were the names of people who claimed to have encountered the Devourer firsthand. They spoke of him in hushed tones, their voices barely above a whisper. "I saw him in the woods," one said. "He was tall and gaunt, with eyes that burned like embers." Another spoke of feeling an intense sense of dread when he walked through certain areas of town. "It's as if something is watching me, waiting for me to make a wrong move," she said. I began to feel like I was living in a waking nightmare, as if the Devourer was always just one step behind me. The more I read, the more I realized that this legend wasn't just some twisted fairy tale, it was real. And I was starting to think that I might be next on the Devourer's list. I spent countless hours scouring the dark web for any mention of the Devourer. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was made of twisted tales and half-truths. But I persisted, driven by a morbid curiosity that refused to let me go. And then, one day, I stumbled upon a hidden forum thread that seemed to be the epicenter of all the Devourer-related whispers. It was a place where enthusiasts gathered to share their experiences, their theories, and their fears. I spent hours browsing through the threads, reading post after post about the Devourer's alleged exploits. Some claimed he could manipulate reality itself, warping the very fabric of space and time. Others spoke of his ability to teleport from one location to another, appearing and disappearing at will. But what struck me most was the eerie sense of community that pervaded the thread. It was as if these strangers had formed a twisted bond, bound together by their shared fascination with the Devourer's dark legend. They spoke of him in hushed tones, using coded language to avoid detection by the authorities. And yet, despite the risk, they continued to share their stories, each one building upon the last like a twisted game of telephone. I began to feel like I was part of this web of whispers, as if I had stumbled into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy were blurring. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, like standing on the edge of a cliff with nothing but darkness below. And then I saw a post that seemed to be addressed directly to me. "We've been waiting for you," it read. "You have a certain curiosity about you." My heart skipped a beat as I realized that I had been noticed. Noticed by who or what, I had no idea. But one thing was certain: my journey into the heart of the Devourer's legend had just become very much more personal. I tried to brush off the feeling of being watched, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I sat in front of my computer, scrolling through the forum thread, I couldn't shake off the sense that I was being pulled into something much larger than myself. And then I saw a post from a user named Echo1, who claimed to have encountered the Devourer firsthand. The message was cryptic, but it seemed to be addressed directly to me. "I've been waiting for you," Echo1 wrote. "Meet me at the old oak tree in Raven's Peak at midnight. Come alone." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the message. Who was Echo1? And what did they want from me? But despite my reservations, I found myself feeling drawn to the idea of meeting this mysterious figure. It was like being pulled into a nightmare from which I couldn't awaken. I decided to take a chance, and at midnight I made my way to Raven's Peak. The old oak tree loomed before me, its branches creaking in the wind like skeletal fingers. I approached cautiously, feeling eyes upon me, and then I saw him, Echo1, standing just beyond the tree line. He was a tall, imposing figure with eyes that seemed to bore into my very soul. "Welcome," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, but my words caught in my throat. Something about Echo1's presence made me feel like I was staring into the abyss itself. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, Echo1 vanished into thin air. I was left standing alone in the darkness, feeling like a ghost trapped between worlds. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that lingered long after Echo1's disappearance. But as I made my way back home, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. And then I started receiving messages from an unknown sender. They were cryptic, but they seemed to be addressed directly to me. The first message read, "The Devourer is not what you think it is." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read the words. Who was sending these messages, and how did they know about the Devourer? The next message came sooner than I expected. "Look again at the old oak tree," it said. "You will find what you're looking for." I felt a surge of anxiety as I read the words. What was I supposed to look for? And why did I feel like I was being led deeper into a trap? The messages continued to arrive, each one more cryptic than the last. "Follow the breadcrumbs," one said. "I am not who you think I am," another claimed. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of twisted game, where the rules were constantly changing and the stakes were higher with every passing moment. And yet, despite my fear, I couldn't help but feel drawn to the mystery. It was as if I had stumbled into a world that existed outside of reality, a world where the laws of physics no longer applied. And I was determined to uncover its secrets, no matter how dark or twisted they might be. The messages continued to arrive, each one leading me deeper into the heart of the Devourer's mystery. But with every step, I felt myself becoming more and more entangled in a web of deceit and manipulation. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled towards something that would change my life forever. I began to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. The messages from the unknown sender had been relentless, each one pushing me deeper into a world of paranoia and confusion. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on me at all times. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every rustle of leaves outside my window sent shivers down my spine. I started to question what was real and what wasn't. Were the messages from Echo One just a product of my own fevered imagination? Or was there something more sinister at play? The lines between reality and fantasy began to blur, and I found myself trapped in a never-ending cycle of doubt and fear. I tried to keep up with my daily routine, but even the simplest tasks seemed daunting. Every meal felt like a struggle, every conversation a minefield waiting to be triggered. My friends and family grew concerned, noticing the change in me that they couldn't quite put their finger on. But I knew what was happening to me. I was descending into madness, consumed by the very mystery that had initially drawn me in. The Devourer's legend seemed to be seeping into my every waking moment, infecting my thoughts and turning them against me. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't awaken, with no escape from the darkness that closed in around me like a shroud. I fell into a deep sleep, exhausted from the endless stream of messages and encounters with Echo One. But when I finally drifted off, my body refused to relax. It was as if it had developed a mind of its own, refusing to let me fall into the abyss of slumber. My arms felt heavy, weighed down by an invisible force that prevented me from moving. My legs trembled beneath me like they were trying to break free from some unseen restraint. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat, unable to escape. The darkness closed in around me, a suffocating shroud that threatened to consume me whole. And then the visions began. Echo One face appeared before me, his eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. He whispered secrets in my ear, telling me things I didn't want to hear about myself. The words were like daggers, piercing through my defenses and striking deep into my soul. I felt my mind fragmenting, breaking apart under the weight of Echo One's whispers. My body was a puppet, dancing on strings controlled by some unseen force. I was trapped in a living hell, unable to escape the horrors that surrounded me. And then, just as suddenly as they began, the vision stopped. I lay there, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. But when I finally worked up the courage to move, I realized that something was terribly wrong. My body felt different. It was as if I had been changed by some unseen force, transformed into something new and terrifying. I found myself in a realm that was both familiar and yet utterly alien. The air was thick with the scent of decay and corruption, and the sky was a deep, bloody red. I could feel the weight of Echo One's presence all around me, his eyes watching me from the shadows. I knew that I had to move forward to navigate this twisted landscape and uncover the secrets that lay within. But every step felt like a betrayal, as if I was walking further into the heart of madness itself. The ground beneath my feet seemed to writhe and twist, like living serpents that threatened to consume me whole. And yet, I pressed on, driven by some morbid curiosity that compelled me to explore this nightmarish realm. Every step revealed a new horror, a new terror that lurked in the shadows, waiting to pounce. The dreams were my only refuge, but even they seemed tainted with the same corruption and decay that had infected the waking world. I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and confusion, unable to escape the clutches of Echo One's twisted games. And yet, I couldn't help but feel drawn deeper into this dream world, as if some dark force was manipulating me towards a terrible destination. The line between reality and fantasy blurred further and further, until it seemed impossible to tell what was real and what was just a product of my own fevered imagination. All I knew was that I had to keep moving forward, no matter how terrifying the journey became. I felt like I was unraveling at the seams. The world around me had become distorted, twisted beyond recognition. Gravity seemed to be warped, causing objects to float and twist in impossible ways. Time itself had become fluid, with moments stretching out into eternity and snatching away from me without warning. Every sense was on high alert, as if I was navigating a maze of sensory feedback loops designed to drive me mad. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning circuits, like the very fabric of reality was being rewired before my eyes. Echo One presence loomed over everything, his voice whispering terrible truths in my ear like a conspirator sharing secrets. I tried to focus on my surroundings, but even the simplest things seemed to have changed. A flower bloomed with leaves that writhed like snakes, its petals stained with an otherworldly goo that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The sky was a swirling vortex of colors, like a mad artist's palette come to life. And yet, amidst this chaos, I sensed something else, a thread of coherence that tied everything together, like a twisted umbilical cord connecting me to the very heart of madness itself. It was as if reality had become a puzzle, with each piece fitted together in a way that defied logic and reason. I knew that I had to solve it, no matter how impossible the task seemed. For in this distorted world, there was only one truth, that the line between reality and nightmare was thinner than I thought, and that the only way out was to confront the abyss head-on. I finally found myself standing before the entrance to the Devourer's lair. The air around me seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, like the very fabric of reality was about to tear apart. I steeled myself for what lay ahead, knowing that this was the moment of truth. The door creaked open, revealing a cavernous space filled with an unholy assortment of artifacts and relics. Echo One's presence pulsed through the air, his voice whispering sweet nothings in my ear like a siren luring me to my doom. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, into the heart of madness itself. The lair was a twisted maze of corridors and chambers, each one filled with an endless array of horrors that defied comprehension. I saw creatures that should not exist, twisted abominations born from the darkest recesses of my own mind. And yet I pressed on, driven by a morbid curiosity to uncover the secrets that lay within. Every step revealed a new terror, a new horror that lurked in the shadows, waiting to pounce. But I knew that I had to keep moving forward, no matter how impossible the task seemed. For in this lair, there was only one truth, that the Devourer was real, and that he waited for me at the very center of madness itself. The air grew colder with every step, until it seemed like I was walking through a frozen tomb filled with the souls of the damned. And then I saw him, the Devourer himself, sitting upon his throne-like chair, surrounded by an aura of unspeakable horror. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my very soul begin to unravel. For in that moment, I knew that I was staring into the face of pure, unadulterated madness itself. As I stood before the Devourer, I felt my sanity slipping away like sand between my fingers. His eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity, piercing through the veil of reality and into the very depths of my soul. I tried to speak, but my voice was frozen in my throat, unable to escape the horror that gazed back at me. The Devourer's face was a twisted parody of humanity, his features stretched and distorted like a funhouse mirror, reflecting the darkest corners of my own mind. His skin was deathly pale, pulled taut over his skull like a drumhead ready to burst. A trail of tiny, glowing wounds crisscrossed his cheeks and forehead, pulsing with an eerie light that seemed to synchronize with the beat of my own racing heart. I felt my vision begin to blur, as if the Devourer's presence was warping the very fabric of reality itself. And yet, despite the terror that gripped me, I couldn't look away. It was as if I was drawn into his gaze, helpless to resist the gravitational pull of his madness. The Devourer's lips curled into a twisted smile, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth that seemed to gleam with an unholy light. "You should not be here," he whispered, his voice like a sigh on the wind. "This is a place of darkness, where the lost souls of humanity go to face their deepest terrors." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with an intensity that made my very soul scream in agony. "And now, you are mine." I felt the Devourer's hand wrap around my wrist like a vice, pulling me closer to his twisted face. His breath was cold and rank, carrying the scent of decay and corruption. I tried to struggle, but it was no use, he was too strong. As he leaned in close, his lips brushing against my ear, I felt a shiver run down my spine. "You are not who you think you are," he whispered, his voice like a rusty gate scraping against concrete. "Your memories, your experiences, they are all lies." I tried to push him away, but he held fast. His grip was like a vice, crushing the life from my wrist. I felt a surge of anger and fear, but it was quickly replaced by a creeping sense of doubt. Could it be true? Was everything I thought I knew about myself a lie? The Devourer's words seemed to echo in my mind, taunting me with the possibility that everything I held dear was just an illusion. "You are not even human," he continued, his voice dripping with malevolence. "You are something else, something ancient and evil." As he spoke, the room around us began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. I felt myself being pulled down into a vortex of madness, with the Devourer as my guide. And when I finally emerged, gasping for air, I was faced with a truth that would change me forever. I was not who I thought I was. But what did that mean exactly?